problem was I didn't see the future for Texas A&M being on the West Coast.
Can I ask you a question about that too, Dr. Loftin? Because when this came out, so I'm a third generation Aggie. My dad and granddad both went to A&M. My brother went to A&M as well. A big Aggie family. But when I heard the rumors about maybe going to the West Coast, the Pac-10 or the Pac-12 or the Pac-16 or whatever it was going to be, there was something about, and I hate to use this word, but I think people will know what I'm talking about. It just culturally didn't seem like a good fit. I mean, not setting aside the fact that you would have to travel these, massively long distances potentially, the fit just didn't feel right. Although, frankly, as somebody who has a degree from UT Law, who spent some time in Austin, it did kind of feel like to me that University of Texas would be a good fit potentially in the Pac-10. So whereas A&M, when I started hearing about the SEC, I mean, I was thinking, man, culturally, that seems like just an absolutely perfect fit. So talk a little bit about that piece of the puzzle. How much of the discussion centered around things other than like travel and expenses and money contracts, and how much of it was just thinking about the fit of the different schools and the different conferences?
Well, that was very important for me personally. It was important for others as well. You've already explained it. I mean, basically, if you look at the majority of schools in the PAC, they are West Coast schools with a very different sort of culture on campus than we have. Clearly, Austin was a much better fit with them than Texas A&M was. The SEC, you're talking about mostly land grant schools like Texas A&M.
Yep.
Kind of heritage, focusing on first generation students, focusing on agriculture, engineering, practical kind of things like that, not so much liberal arts like we would see at UT Austin. It's just the nature of these schools.
Yeah.
All of us do all the things we do, but there's certainly focuses that are very different here. And you're exactly right. I didn't see at all there a fit. In my book, I published a spreadsheet I put together.
Yeah, I know. That thing is incredible. Incredible.
The three possibilities here you have was stay in the Big 12 as it is, or some variant thereof, go to the PAC, go to the SEC. And I wrote down in every dimension you just mentioned and others besides that, issues of travel, but issues of culture were very dominant in that thinking process. Right?
Yeah.
But see, when this became more publicly known, what amazed me is the feedback I got from our former students and our current students. In 2010, it was about 50-50.
Yeah.
About 50% wanted us to go to the SEC, and 50% wanted us to either go to the PAC or stay in the Big 12. That was kind of the way, it really divided house. It was pretty incredible how divided it was. And that was probably due to a lot of things. Some folks just don't like change.
Yep.
Certain rivalries, things like that. Got it. Not a surprise there at all. What was interesting was looking at who the groups were. Those who wanted us to go to the SEC were largely former students from Jackie Sherrill's era.
Really?
Think about that.
Well, I was actually going to ask you this, Dr. Loftin, because my impression was that there was some, for the older Ags, the guys in my dad's class and older, there's still this sense, maybe even a subconscious sense that, we're kind of connected to UT, like we're the little brother or whatever you want to call it. And then there was,
and to actually even more than that, Brian, to the old Southwest Conference. This generation before us, before you, my generation earlier, basically, were wedded to this in-state.
That's right.
I mean, here at A&M, we wore Spurs before we. Okay, it was ingrained in us to play these schools here in Texas that we had historically worked with in the Southwest Conference. And Thanksgiving Day, my time anyway, was a huge day for us to play our friends in Austin.
Yep.
The highlight of my freshman year was Thanksgiving Day, 1967, when I watched A&M beat Texas in Kyle Field 10-7.
Nice.
Ordinary day. I couldn't speak for 3 days. My voice was, it was amazing.
Well, one of the reasons I went to A&M, even though my dad was, you were talking about Jackie Sherrill, even though my dad and granddad went to A&M, one of the reasons I went there is my dad started taking me down. He retired out of Fort Worth. He was the Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, and we lived all over the place. And so I didn't get to go to A&M until like the mid 80s. And that was right when Jackie Sherrill showed up. And I remember going, I think it was in 84, 85. We won, beat Texas to go to the Cotton Bowl, and there's literally cotton raining out of the stands. And I'm looking around going, man, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I got to go here. So generationally, yeah, it sounds like there was a generational gap between.
There was. I mean, the older guys were very much in favor of staying put or going to the Pac. One of the problems was they perceived the SEC to be a lesser conference.
Academically or athletically?
They thought the SEC was lesser academically.
But see, that's not that's and not to interrupt you, but that was a common misconception then.
Yeah,
it's a common
right.
misconception now. I mean, there are more AAU universities. I think there's twice as many, that's American Association universities, in the SEC than there are in the Big 12. I mean, A&M, Florida,
there's
Georgia.
more, but not twice as many. It's 4 versus 3, okay?
Okay, 4 versus 3. Vanderbilt, Georgia.
The Big 10 is all AAU except for Nebraska. The Pac-12 is mostly AAU except for a couple of schools.
Yeah.
You've got these 2 conferences that are really mostly AAU schools that are very much elite public research universities or private research universities. The SEC had only 2 initially. They had Vanderbilt and Florida.
Yeah.
Then A&M joined and Missouri joined. They had 4 all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Took 2 out of the Big 12, and you only had 3 left.
Yeah.
So you sort of begin to see how this played out. And so now the SEC has more AAU schools than the Big 12 does, not by a large number, but it's there. But you saw not only the academic perception being negative of the SEC, but also the integrity question was there too. There was a lot of talk about how much the SEC schools cheated. Well, I looked into that. I looked at NCAA infraction records. The answer was it really wasn't that true. It was sort of there, but it really wasn't there. And so therein lies, this idea of perception versus reality. There was perception that the SEC was negative in terms of academics, in terms of integrity, whereas the other conferences were better. Well, that really wasn't that true. But that's what people thought, and the older ags were really that way.